AM2R, or another Metroid 2 remake, is a fan game made by Milton Guasti. Made over the course of around 10 years, the whole experience feels not just like an HD remake of Metroid 2 for the original Game Boy, but also a celebration of Super Metroid, Metroid Fusion, and Metroid Zero Mission. A lot of what this game brings to the table are small gameplay refinements. Quality of life changes taken from the Prime series and other later Metroid games meant to really make this game feel like a Metroid fan's Metroid game. It has a lot of little settings and knobs you can fiddle to get the game really suited to your preference, and it has a lot of other things meant to keep the game flowing at a fast pace. Gone are the days of pushing down on the D-pad twice to go into Morph Ball. Now you just simply hit a button, and I have to say it really makes platforming a lot more consistent. Graphically speaking, the game looks very nice. It's difficult to heap praise on it considering a lot of assets are simply ripped from other Metroid games, although they have been tweaked slightly to have that HD polish to them. One thing that really stands out though are the fancy particle effects. While they definitely look very nice in high definition, they kind of clash with the game's art style since, while the sprites still resemble the 16-bit Super Nintendo Game Boy Advance look, a lot of the explosions and laser blasts look like they belong on the PlayStation or perhaps even the PlayStation 2. While it's not so jarring that it makes the game unplayable, it does look a little weird at times. I don't know if I would necessarily call it immediately bad, but the look can be a little jarring. On a similar tone, a lot of other custom assets also have the same weird look to them. Though I wouldn't outright call them bad, a lot of the Metroid sprites, especially for the bigger forms such as the Omega Metroid, tend to look a little off. A lot of the custom sprites created by the game's designer look a little off, and you can tell that they were made by someone attempting to emulate Nintendo's classic style rather than an actual Nintendo artist. A lot of the larger Metroids, such as the Omega Metroid and the Queen Metroid, can look a little weird, and ultimately the new sprites tend to clash a little bit with the old official Nintendo sprites. One particularly egregious example was the Flying Chozo statue that grows a jetpack and flies around once you defeat its first form. The fight itself was actually quite fun, but the sprites were in fact very ugly and probably one of the worst looking things in the entire experience. The gameplay itself is quite good. It feels just like classic Metroid, and the level design is actually also very good. However, it's tough to give all of the credit to the developers of this game for something they didn't 100% make. Sure, a lot of the old level design from the Game Boy version was retooled and completely changed to fit modern Metroid, but it's still very much levels that weren't originally built by the creator of the game. The same goes for both the gameplay mechanics and the graphical style. Like I said, this game was very well made, and while I definitely have a lot of praise to give to the creator, at the same time it's difficult to 100% just heap all this praise on them for something that they didn't quite make themselves. This game is, after all, built on the backs of giants. A lot of the parts in this game that weren't in the original Metroid 2 are also callbacks to other Metroid games. So even if the mechanics are ultimately very new, it's nothing I've never seen before. We've all fought a Chozo statue that came to life and started attacking us, though granted, the one in Super Metroid didn't sprout wings and start flying. And a lot of boss fights just feel like they took a similar boss fight from an old game and applied a fresh coat of paint in terms of mechanics to them. I'm actually very surprised that no original mechanics were added to the game. I'm not saying it would have made it better, but it is a little weird to think of the fact that you would spend 10 years making a game like this and you wouldn't try to create your own power-up. Ultimately, this game is a fantastic love letter to 2D Metroid. It has all the best parts of previous Metroids, and it really does feel like a best of. It kind of feels like the Metroid equivalent to a greatest hits album. However, while this seems like an interesting point to dock against it, nothing is really new with it. And a lot of the stuff that is new feels very obvious that it was made by people who weren't Nintendo with lower budget and production methods. That's why my final verdict for this game is that if you love Metroid, you absolutely have to play it. But if you're looking for an entry point into the series, I would recommend pretty much any other Metroid game.